First week of 1864 and a new war. 1862 saw the Dakota War and 1864 has the Navajo War. And when it rains, it pours. Freezing camps, bloody blockades, officer replacement, political poise, and more. The last 2 weeks have been a good rest, but I'm ready to hit the ground running for this exciting new year. New year, new style, and this feels wrong. On the 1st, the camps of the Army of the Potomac under Union General Meade and the rebel Army of Northern Virginia under General Lee both go below zero. The winter frost hits both armies hard, but it strikes Lee harder. His army is low on supplies, and while a broken tent, cut socks, and no blankets might work in the summer heat, not all who went to sleep on the 31st woke up. The Union Army isn't comfortable nor free from the provision problems, but it is many times better than the rebels. On the 2nd, we move southwest to Alabama, Mobile Bay. Major General Stephen A. Hurlbut, the commander of the 16th Corps, which operates in the area, wires Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles.
The Tennessee at Mobile will be ready for sea in 20 days. She is a dangerous cat. Buchanan thinks more so than the Merrimac.
I fear for the Union fleet at Mobile Bay. Rebel Admiral Franklin Buchanan is right. The Tennessee is a behemoth, the largest Confederate ironclad ever. 209 feet long, 48 feet beam, 14 feet draft, 6 inches of forward armor, and 2 inches on the decking, all triple thickness. The same day, but a different blockade at Wilmington, North Carolina. Norfolk, Virginia fell in 1862, leaving Wilmington the last major Confederate port on the Atlantic. Suck it, Charleston! Of course, being the last major doesn't mean the Union is safe. The city has become a central hub of blockade runners, and we must shut the port down! Secretary of War Edwin Stanton and Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles meet to discuss Wilmington. Welles proposed a joint assault on Wilmington. Both men accepted the coordinated assault. General-in-Chief Henry Halleck rejects it, saying that he can't spare the manpower. I'm not sure I believe him. For heaven's sake, the armies are in camp. Couldn't a corps be spared? On the 3rd, Major General Francis J. Herron becomes the commander of the Union along the Rio Grande. He's an inoffensive and above-average general, dull but respectable. On the 4th, Davis, confronted with just how terrible his supply situation is, goes to a drastic measure, writing to General Robert.E.Lee,
"The emergency justifies impressment."
The Army of Northern Virginia now has the authority to steal food and other items from its own citizens. This isn't unheard of. George Washington was forced to do the same thing during the Revolution, but this is a huge line to cross, especially when the populace is starving. I mean, I don't know what I would do if I were in Jefferson Davis's situation. Actually, I do, but the man is too stubborn to surrender. What is his endgame? What is he hoping for? The blockades to magically sink, Lincoln to be hypnotized and come to the negotiation table, the entire Union Army to mutiny? Next, something unheard of. I usually don't review how I find my information, but this one deserves it. The always reliable Wikipedia informed me about an action on the 4th of January at Pecos River. The page has only one source, a book on the Encyclopedia of Indian Wars. I don't have this book and therefore couldn't check it directly. So I instead went to my traditional sources for small day-by-day activities and found nothing on it. I then checked the general list of troop engagements of 1864 and nothing. I then asked an actual historian, the Cynical Historian, you should check him out, for help. It gives me many places to start, and my library has none of them. So I then look up Navajo, and I get one book, a general overview of the frontier wars, and it has 3 pages about the time during the Civil War, none mentioning the battle. I look up the names of the preceding leaders, nothing. I was about to give up when I decided to go through the rebellion records, and there on page 327, doc 42, I get a passage about the battle in New Mexico, which is present in a digitized version from the New York Times, which I shall now present to you.
Fort Sumner, New Mexico, Saturday, January 30th, 1864. On the 4th day of this month, at 11:30 the bugle sounded, "To arms! To arms!" which roused every man in camp. Our company was out on a 30-day scout at the time, only having left 6 men, or the Company B, 2nd Cavalry California Volunteers, in camp. The 6 were in their saddle and double quick and off. The party consisted of 1 lieutenant, infantry, 6 men of Company B, 2nd Cavalry California Volunteers, 3 men of Company D, 5th United States Infantry, 25 Apache Indians, and 3 Mexican citizens. At 10 minutes to 12 o'clock, we started down the river Pecos. Soon found the case of alarm. 120 Navajo Indians had been within 2 miles of the fort and stolen all the Apache horses and mules, and were driving them off as leisurely as though they had paid for them. We rode for 12 miles at a brisk gallop, and we arrived at the top of a small ridge. And behold, the whole party of hostile Navajos were in full sight, about 1 mile below. When we came in sight of the enemy, we made a halt and waited for all the Apache Indians to come up and arrange their arms and tie up their heads for the fight. We, the soldiers, made all necessary arrangements to have our cartridges as convenient as possible. When the word was heard, "All ready!" It's well known that the Navajo can whip the Apache, our allied forces, 2-to-1. So the soldiers formed in the center and the Indians, Apaches, around us. But the enemy could not see anything but Apaches. We were within 150 yards of them, on the full charge. When the signal was given, to the right and left, Apaches charged right and left, and we in the center. First thing that Mr. Johnny Navajo knew of us, were we upon them like 1,000 of bricks. The fight commenced simultaneously on right and left and center. The Navajo made a stand for one volley from our carbines, and they made the air black with arrows for about 2 minutes. Then they saw so many of their men falling, and none of us, took to their heels and run for their life. But it was no go, for we kept close to them, and we kept giving them the benefit of our breech-loading carbines. Their bows and arrows were like so many straws, for after the first volley we found that we had the long range on them, and we made use of it. Their arrows are harmless over 30 yards, and they had no rocks to get behind, the battle being on an open plain, so that we chose our own distance and gave them fits. Navajo gave evidence of great excitement. At the commence of the fight, they shot all their arrows over our heads. After that, they never got any chance to shoot us at all. This accounts for the great victory and loss of no men. We followed them 6 miles, shooting them down on all sides. Just as the sun was going behind the bill, we were ordered to cease firing and return home. We went over the background and found by the simple rule of addition, out of 120 Indians, we had killed 62. This we call good work, and for which we were complimented by the commanding officer at Fort Sumter. I will here say by way of explanation that the Apache Indians spoken of are a lot of Indians of the Apache tribe that came in and gave themselves up voluntarily, and are fed at the expense of the government. They number 480. They go out on all occasions and fight the Navajos if the soldiers are going. If not, they stay at home. They fight well with the soldiers.
With this break of character, let's break the timeline both ways. Colonel Kit Carson has been an important man in expanding the American frontier and a giant symbol of the brutality that brings. He signed up for the Union Army at the start of the war and led federal fighters to victory at Valverde. Once rebels were out of sight, he turned to deal with the native presence, the Apache and the Navajo. Under orders to kill all the men and kidnap the women and children, he engaged in a campaign to bring the Apache into submission. He would wrangle the women and children at the site of the battle, Bosque Redondo by Fort Sumner, a barren land far from any settlement. He then engaged in a similar campaign against the Navajo, though these tribes would be far more challenging for him to round up, fleeing from their homes and settlements whenever Carson arrived. The colonel took to a policy of burning crops and food supplies, starving them into submission, which is why they assaulted the Apache at Bosque Redondo. By the start of winter in 1863, 188 Navajo had joined the Apache at the reservation, but some still evaded Carson. The assault of Fort Sumner can only mean one thing: the rival of the Union. Hastin Daga, also known as Barbanchito, is robust and ready to take America on, of course with the help of his brother Atsidisani, also known as Dogadito, and Chief Hastin Chiao Hajiane or Manulito. On the 6th, under orders from General James H. Carleton, Carson moves towards Barbanchito's home of Canyon de Chelly. God, I suck at pronunciations. Luckily, the next thing is all in English. On the 5th, the U.S. Congress prohibits the payment of $300 bounties given out for reenlistments. I agree with Lincoln. He begs them to reconsider. The executive branch wants just one more month to get people to sign up. I want it forever. The concern of cost must come secondary to supporting our soldiers. Was it not too much to increase taxes or cut down on the loopholes? The 6th sees a rebel assault on the steamer Delta. For the final day of the week, let's start with mercy. President Lincoln commuted the death sentence of a young deserter.
Because I am trying to evade the butchering business lately.
The commutation of deserters is shared. The day before, Davis did the same thing. Davis, on the 7th, appointed William Preston as envoy extraordinary and minister plenipotentiary, his swearing, which is my first language, from the Confederacy to Maximilian, Emperor of Mexico. William Preston is both a former Confederate officer and diplomat, having served as the ambassador to Spain from 1858 to 1861. This is an obvious attempt to buddy up with France, but it might be too late. At the same time, Napoleon III, the power behind Maximilian, would celebrate Confederate victory. He also was spread thin, Cambodia, Mexico, and the Italian peninsula all causing him a migraine. Now, we go to Charleston. Admiral Dahlgren has a warning to his men. First, the typical torpedo boats, then...
There's also one of another kind, which is nearly submerged and can be entirely so. It is intended to go under the bottom of vessels and there to operate. It is also advisable not to anchor in the deepest part of the channel, for by not leaving much space between the bottom of the vessel and the bottom of the channel, it will be impossible for the diving torpedo to operate except on the sides, and there will be less difficulty in raising a vessel if sunk.
He is referring to the CSS Hunley, the submarine, and the fatalism around it is horrifying. The final thing this week is a return to Wilmington. Major General Benjamin F. Butler controls the Department of North Carolina and Virginia, and has taken a blunt fist towards the problems before him. He has been floating around the idea of recruiting Confederate prisoners into a federal regiment. When confronted with the issue at Wilmington, he plans to take a commercial steamer, make it look like a blockade runner, fill it with Union regiments, and sail it into the harbor. This is turned down because the Confederates too closely checked the checkpoints. Daniel Sickles waits with heavy breath as Congress votes to relaunch the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War. It's a success. The Democrats and unconditional Unionists don't matter here. Benjamin Wade and Zachariah Chandler are the two Republican senators, and George Julian and Daniel Gooch are the two Republican representatives. Chandler is another friend of Sickles. This committee is pro-Dan. The power couple of Julian and Gooch work so well together. Gooch is a great investigator, and Julian's confrontational spirit is a spirit that cuts to the point. The committee immediately expands its powers. Sickles' gang is growing. That's where the week ends, and I already see a change from the previous years. The rebels are desperate, stealing from their citizens or throwing all their eggs in one ironclad. This is understandable, as the position of the Confederacy is at the weakest it's ever been. The Union is quite cautious. The officers across the country are spending their time doing reconnaissance, drawing up plans, and preparing. I doubt we will see this planning pay off. Then there is the new war. I say new war, but the armed conflict with Navajo tribes is nothing new, and the raiding and pillaging of Colonel Kit Carson have been happening continuously for months. But this week saw it reach the headlines. I fear what this will do. Carson is a butcher and a blight on America. What goes around comes around. I'll see you next week. Hello, and welcome to Civil War Week by Week. And with this new year, you might have noticed a return to something familiar. For old-time viewers, you might realize that this computer is eerily close to me. That's because I'm once again filming on a Mac. Not the same Mac. That has been one of the most permanent parts of this channel, a MacBook Air I used to film my first videos. And it is no longer of this world. It's actually on a couch somewhere. I have decided that the coming new year will see some huge upgrades wherever I can. I've also removed the very permanent iMovie and replaced it with the Final Cut Pro. I have a feeling this video is going to have some growing pains. I can already identify a few. I had to ADR some lines in. But I hope you will stick with me. I hope to see you next week.